Good morning. My name is Sarah Dean and I'm the Senior Advisor Emergency Management for Tablelands Regional Council. Online with us today is Callum Kippin, the Economic Development Officer for Tablelands Regional Council. Welcome to Securing the Knowledge COVID-19, a business continuity webinar for Tablelands businesses. This webinar is provided free of charge to Tablelands businesses by Tablelands Regional Council from funding secured under the Queensland Government Get Ready Queensland program. It would be useful to have a pen and paper handy to take notes, and when the webinar is finalised, you will have the skeleton of a business continuity plan for your company. Your facilitator today is Graham Nisbet. Graham is the Principal of Continuity Planners Australia, a business continuity consulting company. Thanks, Graham. Over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, it's fantastic to be with you today, wherever it is that you are listening or watching this video. We're going to walk you through some useful material today, and as Sarah said, make some notes for yourself because you'll start to have the rudiments of a good, solid business continuity plan for your business. As Sarah said, I'm Graham Nisbet. I'm the Principal of Continuity Planners Australia. We're an Australian business continuity firm. We work with organisations large and small to help them make sure they have a solid recovery plan if something goes badly wrong at their place of business. So we've got a series of things to go through with you this morning. The aim of this webinar is to give you information to help you continue to deliver your critical functions. Now, we've given this webinar a COVID-19 flavour because absolutely that's what's been dominating our thinking for the last little while. You can see on screen there that we ran a couple of live webinars, in June. They were really well attended by people from the Tablelands business sort of community, and there was demand for this to be available in an ongoing fashion. So we're recording this webinar so that you can look at it at your leisure and go through the same material that the people who dialed into those webinars were able to interact with. Okay, so the objectives of our time together. Firstly, we'll talk about the action that businesses can take now, that's as we are getting back into the sort of post-peak COVID-19 shutdown period. That's a mouthful. I'm not exactly sure how we discuss where we are now. We're not back to normal. We won't be back to normal, whatever that is, for some time. Perhaps it's a new normal. People are using all manner of technology terminology. Anyway, so let's talk a bit about the actions you can take now so that you can get back into business in a COVID-safe way. And an important part of that is to identify your critical business functions and the key people in your organisation you need so that those functions can continue if indeed COVID-19 comes back to your business. Now, we've got experience of that, and as the lockdowns start to ease up around the country, we are seeing time and again flare-ups of COVID-19 breakouts. And if your business is impacted, and that's not beyond the bounds of possibility, we'd like to have you well prepared so that you'll be able to continue your business. And then, having thought through how to continue your business in a COVID-19 outbreak, we'll go through the rudiments of how you could use that planning to make sure you survive any other kind of disruption so that you can continue to thrive, even if something, a cyclone or a flood or some other interruptive event occurs at your place. So, agenda. So a quick background to COVID-19, talk about where we're up to now, what might happen next as we continue to ease up around the country on the post-COVID-19 lockdown period. What you can do before it happens, and the it in this case is if your business gets specifically impacted by the ongoing COVID-19 arrangements. What to do when it happens, when it's over, and how to use the planning you should be doing now so that you'll be ready for whatever the next business disruption is. The opportunity you've got is because you're starting to think about the really important things about how to make your business work should you have a COVID-19 shutdown, then that thinking is solid and available to you so you can use it if you have another disruption. Okay, some quick background. Now, this is nothing probably that you haven't seen before. But I think it's important to realise that while it seems like we've been involved in the COVID situation sort of forever, it was only Christmas time that the novel coronavirus appeared in China. It was only the 26th of January this year, only a few months ago, that Australia had its first confirmed cases. And as you know, then it wasn't until March the 11th that the World Health Organization declared a pandemic. And that's where we started to pay attention. And of course, that was when we started using the name COVID-19. I was particularly intrigued in that I've been involved in pandemic planning for, well, I guess over a decade. And I thought when the pandemic first started to bubble up, they might call it the China COVID or something, in the way that they called the Spanish flu in 1918, the Spanish flu. Because the Spanish flu didn't start in Spain, but that was the name they gave it. Anyway, I think COVID-19 is a very sound name because it describes the pandemic rather than its place of origin, because clearly it's a worldwide situation now. Anyway, how did we get here? Just quickly again, as you know, we started in March with various sorts of lockdowns. It was only March 23rd that we all started paying attention. I'm based in Cairns at the moment, and my observation was no one much was paying too much attention to the social distancing up until the 23rd of March, when the government closed the pubs, at which point I think everyone started to think, perhaps this is serious, let's pay attention to it. And indeed it is serious, as we know, and we have all been paying very close attention. Various other things closed down in March, and then you know that we had a hibernation period, for want of a better word, and through till about May the 15th where things started to ease up. And then Australia ended up with 7,000 odd cases by the 26th of May. It's a few more. I think the death toll, as I speak, continues to be around 102. That's 102 too many, but remarkably less than it really could have been if the Australian government hadn't done what it did. Now, the Australian government did what it did because it had a plan, and this is the key. When you've got a plan on how to deal with a disruptive event, dealing with it is so much easier. The Australian government has had an Australian health management plan for pandemic influenza for some time. The government plan was updated as recently as August of last year. Now, while this isn't an influenza pandemic, it does have many of the same hallmarks. And of course, the Queensland government and each of the other state governments built their own pandemic influenza plans. And these have been the beginnings of the playbook for how to handle the coronavirus. It did allow then the governments in Australia to focus on coronavirus specific response plans. And this is the Australian Health Sector Emergency Plan that was put together earlier this year in March or February. And that's been sort of the playbook that we've been using. The point here is the government isn't just making it up as they go along, although as we come out of lockdown, we're beginning to wonder about that. But certainly going into lockdown and how to deal with the event, it was based on solid planning. Now, any plan is never going to be perfect, but if you've got a plan, you're 3/4 of the way through knowing what to do when something happens. Okay, well, as you know, we are now into the easing roadmap, and just depending on when you're watching this, we are somewhere probably in the 3-stage easing roadmap. And we know the children are back at school. We know Queensland Health is ready to manage outbreaks, and we are variously opening up with social distancing and so on. I want to talk more about that and your business as we go along this morning. What is important for you to have very firmly in your mind as a business person in the Tablelands is that you have a duty of care to your staff, your customers, your suppliers, and other people who come to your business. You've always had that duty of care. Nothing has changed, but now we have a specific known risk, and that's the risk of contracting COVID-19. Now, happily, WorkSafe Queensland has put together some fantastic business resources. They're all available freely to you. There's the link. Have a good look at WorkSafe Queensland. They have got checklists and procedures for cleaning and for everything else that you might want. So have a look at that and get what is appropriate to your business. You need to have a plan in place for your business. Now, not just if you're a customer-facing shop or restaurant or cafe or whatever, but whatever you are, an engineering firm, a funds management company, an architectural design organisation, whatever you are, as a business and a business owner, you do need to have a plan for how you will manage the COVID-19 in your workplace. Now, this is just existing requirements of legislation. You have to keep your people safe. And so there's lots of good resources there. And if you are in a customer-facing environment like a cafe or whatever, you'll also know there's an online training program that you and your staff need to do, and that's available through TAFE Queensland. If you are in that environment and you haven't already caught up with the checklist, you really do need to get into that. It's not complex to do, but it is important. I want to talk to you about Cedar Meets. Now, I guess if you've been paying attention to the media over the last few months, you probably have seen this. But I'm using it as a case study because Cedar Meets is an organisation. It operates in Melbourne. It's a meat processing organisation. It has 350 staff, and one day, about the beginning of May, one of the workers came to work and the worker was COVID-19 positive. Now that required then notification, it went through all the usual processes that because that worker was infected, all 350 staff had to be tested and the facility had to be shut down. And the protocol in Victoria, and it's quite similar in Queensland, is that Queensland Health would come into your business if one of your staff presented as COVID-19 positive. They would require your staff to be tested. They'd shut down your facility and make sure that you got it thoroughly cleaned, and they'd send all of your staff home. Now that's standard operating procedure. I don't expect Queensland Health would do much different if it was happening to your business in the Tablelands. So you've got to think, what would I do if my staff are sent home to quarantine? Now in the Cedar Meets case, 67 of the staff eventually tested positive to COVID-19. So you've got 67 out of 350. There's a big chunk of your staff are off sick. They also gave it, as it happens, to 44 of their friends and relatives. So out of that one worker turning up unwell to Cedar Meets, 100 and something people ended up unwell. But more importantly, for our discussion, Cedar Meets' business was badly disrupted. They couldn't do what they would do for the 2 weeks they were shut down for cleaning. In the event, in this particular case, I don't have all the details, but Cedar Meets didn't open for 4 weeks. It was towards the end of May when they could reopen their doors and their staff who were well could come back and do work. So start to think, what would happen at your place if it got shut down, everyone was sent home to quarantine? It'll be a business disruption. Now, happily or unhappily, really, for Cedar Meets, they got national press exposure. Going forward, anyone who ever hears the word Cedar Meets probably won't think about a good and responsible meat producer. They'll probably think about that mob that were all sick and caused all that confusion in the community. I don't think you would want your business to be remembered that way. So, here's where we are. So as I record this, we're in June. Businesses are starting to trade again, and you hopefully are continuing to trade, but you are now trading in a COVID-safe way. Because we know that COVID-19 will continue to circulate in the community of Australia, hopefully at a manageable rate, until such time as the vaccine is deployed. Now, the very best estimate is the end of next year. There are some promising vaccine trials underway, but even if we had a vaccine already nailed down and it was known to be effective and successful, simply producing enough of it for everyone takes a very long time, and then it has to be deployed and you've got to line up somewhere to get a jab in your arm and so on. So really, it's got to be the end of next year before we could rely upon you and I being suitably inoculated. So therefore, somewhere there, over that period, there's a reasonable chance one of your staff or your customers will bring the infection to your business. Now, we have to hope that's not going to happen, but sensible business planning is all about planning for the worst and hoping for the best. So let's plan for the worst. And the worst would be, other than the illness and the people and the personal impact of the illness on the people, Queensland Health will come down and say to you, listen, you need to shut down and send all your people home. Now, listen, that's okay. Now, if you're geared up so your people can work from home, if you're that sort of business, then that's fantastic. And indeed, if you can do that, you probably have been doing that during the lockdown period and you've had people working from home. But if not all of your people can work from home, then you've got to be thinking, well, hang on, when they get sent home, that work won't be done, because it can't be done unless someone is in my premises and my premises has been shut down. And then, of course, some of your staff will get sick. That's the tragic reality. Some will get very sick, some will not get very sick. Either way, a person who is unwell is not fit for work, so you can't have them sitting at home, coughing, sniffling and doing your work. They need to sit at home, sniffle and recover, watch daytime TV, sleep, whatever you do to make sure you get well. You're not working while you're sick. That's the way that it should be done. So then before it happens, well, clearly you need to actively ensure that you do have a COVID-19 safe workplace plan and that it's working. No prizes for having a plan that says that everybody entering my business must use the hand sanitizer if people who are entering your business aren't using the hand sanitizer and you're not doing anything about it. So you need a plan and you need to make sure it's working. Right, and then you need to think through, gee, what will I do? How will I run my business if we are impacted by a COVID-19 shutdown? How will I continue the critical business functions if my staff are either not here or they're sick or both? And think about how you'll return to work afterwards. And of course, that also needs some consideration. There'll be backlogs and things that haven't been done and so on. So here's things to consider. A quick and easy list, and then I want to unpack each of these items. You need to think about, well, what are my critical functions anyway? Who are my critical staff? What stuff, technology, computers, machines, devices do my staff need so they can do each of my critical functions? What other resources do they need? What trucks, utilities, combine harvesters, whatever it is that you might need in your business? And who supplies to me all the things that I use? My consumer durables, my office supplies, my feed supplies, whatever it is. Who are my suppliers? What do I need for each of my critical functions? Think about who are your customers, particularly those customers who provide you with most of your income or your profit. So who are my most important customers? And then indeed, how do I contact all the people that I need to contact if something's gone wrong at my place of business? So they're the things I want to unpack. A handful of points, important points, and here's where probably you should make some notes for yourself as we go along. This being a video, of course, you can pause, make some notes and come back, and I'd encourage you to do that. Okay, so first and foremost, make a list, piece of paper and a pen, or indeed a Word document on your screen, whatever. List your critical business functions. So what are the things that we do, which if we stop doing them, that'll drop us in a big hole. That would really be really bad. Now, out of 100% of everything you do, and 100% of everything you do is important, well, clearly you wouldn't be spending time, money and resources on doing them. So they're all important. But in terms of critical, what are the things that really would be the showstoppers? What would stop our production happening? What would stop us being able to pay our staff? What would stop whatever are the big ticket items? We have a template available to you, which is a full business continuity plan template. It has a couple of pieces of jargon in it. And when thinking about critical functions, there's a piece of jargon called maximum allowable outage, which is the maximum amount of time I could allow being out or unable to do one of my functions. So think about how many days, hours, minutes could I not do one of my critical functions before it has a catastrophic impact on my business. So having thought through what are my functions and how long can I go without them, make a list of who the staff are who do each of those things. This is important because particularly as you're probably a reasonably modest sized business, you've probably got one or two critical staff who possibly do all of the critical functions. And you need to identify that for yourself because that needs some careful planning. You need to make a list of any IT or other machines that you need, computers, software, dongles, gizmos, whatever it might be. And then any other material or supplies that you need for each of those critical functions. So for each critical function, a list of who does it, what do they need so they can do it. And then importantly, can they do it? So can Mary Jane still run the payroll if she is in home isolation? Or do I need her sitting at the desk in our place of work. No rocket science, but important structured thinking. In the template we can make available to you, there's a table you can fill in, there's a column for each of those. So you've thought through what are your critical functions and who are the people who do them. Now, all of your staff, whether they're involved in critical functions or not, you need to be able to contact them. So make sure you've got emergency contact details for all of your staff, and it's appropriate now to check those numbers are up to date and nobody has moved house or changed mobile phone numbers or whatever since last time you needed to contact them. So then sit back and think about your staff and think, okay, if I've only got 1 or 2 people who really know how to do something, whatever the something is, I should review my roster and my shifts to minimise the crossover so that if I've only got 2 people who know how to do it and they both sit next to each other all day, every day in my place of work, now is an appropriate time to think, no, we need to mitigate that. How can I make sure that Jill and Bill are not sitting next to each other all the time because they're the only ones that know how to do one of my critical functions. Let's change the roster. So Jill's here on Tuesdays and Thursdays and works remotely the rest of the time, and Bill's here on Monday, Wednesday and Friday and works remotely the rest of the time. They don't physically cross over. You need clearly to make sure they keep talking to each other as they might need to for business or personal purposes, but do that remotely and electronically. Don't have them within 1.5 meters of each other at any time. And then think through the sequence of who would take over as each person gets sick. Well, Jill gets sick, Bill can do it all, and that'll be good. But then when Bill gets sick, well, I don't have anyone else who knows it all. But Mary Lou has some idea, perhaps she could take over, but work through in your mind who will take over as each person gets sick. And then having done that, get them trained up. Well, yeah, Sammy used to do it, but hasn't done it for a year, could probably pick it up again, but really is out of date. I'm going to get Sammy to sit with the people for a couple of hours every afternoon for the next week till they figure they've caught up on how to do it, whatever it is. And then the person who does it, normally, get them to write down some procedures. Usually they've been doing it for 30 years, it's all in their mind, they do it automatically, it's not a problem. Well, that's true unless they get seriously unwell, in which case it's the real problem. Just get them to make some notes. Now, you don't need a detailed procedure so Graham can run it. I don't need to be able to do it, but someone else in your business who's got a bit of a clue on how things go, they need a list of procedures so they make sure they don't forget any critical elements of your business function if they've got to take over when the principal and perhaps the backup person are unwell. And then in thinking about your people, also define when sick staff can return to work. So you may have that in place already for anyone who's unwell. Before they can come back, they need to have some way to define that they are well. So work out for yourself, when will you be happy for people to come back? And finally, but importantly, consider for yourself how you might assist your staff to deal with the serious illness or perhaps death of a colleague. We've had a range of COVID-19 people quite unwell, and as we know, people with existing medical conditions and so on are likely to get very unwell. Some have passed away. You've really got to hope that's not going to happen at your place of work, but you know your staff, and if some of them are elderly or already immune compromised for some reason, it's not beyond possible. You don't need to make a meal of this, but start to think about how you'll manage if some of your people do not survive, as it were. Not a happy thought. Let's move on. Technology, much more interesting. You need a list of the computer hardware and software that you need for each of your critical functions. It needs to be a sufficiently detailed list so you can go and buy another one if the one you've got disappears, doesn't work, or you have to get one so that someone can work from home with it. So it needs to say whatever it is. We need a Windows-based PC running Windows, whatever it is, 10, the latest Microsoft 365, payroll is run on MYOB in the cloud, whatever it is, make a list. Now, obviously, you're probably already doing this. Make sure that all your software, your data, your applications are backed up. You should be doing that now. You should routinely back them up, either backing it up to the cloud or backing it up to an external drive, which is off-site somewhere. You're probably already doing this. If you're not, probably important time to give some thought. And at this time, it's also important to say, well, how can my staff members access it, the computer and the software and whatever, if they aren't here, but they are operating remotely? Now, again, if you've been operating remotely for the last number of months, you've probably already sorted this. But if you haven't, we're not out of the period where you should be giving it some thought. What other resources have you got? For most functions, there will be some other machine, gizmo, dongle, ledger, contract, document, password, key, codes, operating instruction, something that sits on the desk which is used routinely, and you need one if you're doing it here or if you're doing it from a remote location. Where do we keep the keys to the ute? Are there a second set of keys? Not much good if we only use the ute once a week and the keys are in the office, but the office has been closed because we've got it closed for a deep clean and we can't get in, so we can't get to the keys. Where are the alternate keys? Who's got the backup set of ute keys at home? Whatever it is, just start to think through that. And also for all the resources in your place of business, these days with mobile phones being so easy to take photographs and videos, wander around your place of business, perhaps today with your phone, and take photos of things, particularly if you have any kind of machinery that you've had for a while. It's still working well, but it sits in the corner and we're not 100% sure what it's called. Because if we need to get another one installed in someone's shed for a couple of weeks so we can keep doing what we do here, but we're closed down, you can't just ring up the supplier and say, I've got one of those yellow machines. You need to be able to quote model number and so on. So take some photos of it and then find the compliance plate on the device and take a photo of that so you know exactly the model number and year of manufacture, that sort of thing. Important now, but obviously useful in any business continuity environment. If you've had a fire at your place or whatever and things are destroyed, it's always good to know what was there. You should go around every 6 months and refresh the photos and so on. Terribly easy. Keep the video off-site, put it on your computer at home, whatever, so that you can dig it out when you need it. Suppliers then. Identify who are the people or organisations who supply you with the products or services that you rely on for each of your critical functions. So you need to know what you need, need to know who supplies them. And I would encourage you to talk to your suppliers, the fellows or ladies who supply you with things. They turn up every Tuesday with 4 boxes of them. You use 4 boxes a week. They turn up every other Tuesday with another 4 boxes. But if they get sick at their place and they're not able to continue their business, if they're not going to turn up on Tuesday with the 4 boxes, that's going to be not very good for you. So say to them, hey, listen, in these times of COVID-19 and us all focusing on our business recovery capacity, can you tell me about your business continuity plan? And if they have good business continuity plans, that's fantastic. And if they don't, that's not very good. But either way, think for yourself, could I replace any of those suppliers if they were impacted, affected, or whatever? Perhaps at an appropriate time, think, well, what I might do is start getting 1 box a week from another supplier. And that way I've got 2 suppliers, and then if one of them goes down for the count, I can get onto the other one and they can increase supply so that I can still get what I need. So think through those alternate suppliers. This is often very difficult because there's only one person who supplies it to us. But really, if there is a single point of failure, you've always got to, hope for the best, plan for the worst. If they fall over, what will you do? Work it out now. And indeed, you might be able to work it out now and keep 8 boxes of it in the cupboard, because that will give you a couple of weeks buffer if one of them falls over. So consider if you want to carry more inventory at this time or for a time. So we've thought about who supplies us. Well, think about your customers, and you can probably rattle off who are your important customers. We'll write them down and work out which of our critical functions really have to be operating well so that I can supply to my customers what it is that they most need. And think through, if I've only got a limited production, I can only make a handful instead of dozens of this thing each week because my key production people are off sick for one reason or another. Who will I give my limited production to? Well, I guess your most valuable customers is the easy answer, but you might decide in another way. It doesn't matter. but think through, if I've only got 50% of my supply, who do I give it to? And indeed, if your staff go down with the virus and are unwell, if one of your staff is the key relationship manager with a major customer, well, think that through too, and think about having a backup and introducing one of your other staff to the key customer, so that if one of your staff is unwell, that you don't lose the relationship with the key customer. So work all that out, write it all down. And then at this time, it's important to make sure all of your contact lists are up to date. You need to be able to contact your staff, we talked about that. But you also want to be able to contact your customers, your suppliers, and any other stakeholders. And this is important because if something happens at your place, you need to be able to get information out to them quickly. So at this time, before anything goes wrong, check your email lists or your text list or mailing distribution or however it is that you contact your people. Check all the lists are up to date, the addresses of work, send out an exercise test of some sort, just to check that everyone's up to date. And obviously, if you usually communicate via your Facebook page or your Twitter page or whatever it is, check that that's all in place. And if only one of your staff members has got the log on to that, make sure that that's replicated in case they're unwell. Not very good if you want to update your Facebook page, but the only person who can do it is off sick. And if you are not already using some sort of electronic meeting capability, Zoom or whatever, perhaps have a bit of a exercise with that to check it works, so that you can communicate easily with your staff if they are operating remotely from their homes or whatever. And I would recommend that you sit down in a quiet moment and draft up some key messages. Think to yourself, right, okay, let's pretend that my place has got COVID-19. We've been shut down. The local media will probably carry the story. They will have a version of it. It will probably be as correct as the media contacts can make it, but it may not be the story that you want going out. So you should have your message ready to go. Clearly on the day, you'll need to update the specifics. But if you have thought through broadly what you want to tell people, you know, we've had an incident, but we do have a plan for operating remotely. We'll be swapping over to that plan. We expect to be back up to 85% capacity within a week. So if you're a customer, don't worry, we'll still be able to supply you. Whatever it is you want to say to your constituency, to your customers and your suppliers and your stakeholders, think about it now so that you can tidy those messages up and send them if something happens. There is nothing worse than trying to work out what to tell people in the middle of a crisis, because, well, you're in the middle of a crisis. So there you go. If you've thought all that through, and then COVID-19 comes to town and the chief medical officer or one of her delegates turns up at your place and says, we need to shut you down, you can keep calm and don't panic. So let's say it's happened. COVID-19's arrived at your place of work. Well, clearly don't panic. Now you've got some plans you've been working through. You can implement them. Firstly, you should probably confirm for your staff which are the critical business functions. So you've all got to go home. You're going to be working remotely for a couple of weeks. Please stay as well as you can. If you become unwell, clearly you won't be able to work. But if you are well and you can present for work from your place, here's what I want you working on. So check that they know what you want them to do while they're working remotely. And then confirm for the staff what would be the sequence of people taking over, because if Julie rings up on Monday morning and says, listen, I've been working home for a few days, but now I've got a sore throat and I've been tested and I'm positive and so I'm going back to bed, know who will take over. And of course, confirm with your staff who will be responsible for what and who makes decisions and actions as things unfold. Now, it's probably you. The business principal typically is the one who makes all the decisions and has all the signing authorities and delegated responsibilities and so on. But if you're the one who's unwell, the staff need to know who will take over which bits, who will stand in for you if you are, how you say, not very well. So that's easy. Just confirm what it is your plan says. Clearly, you also need to check that the workplace health and safety arrangements are in place so that people can work correctly and safely from home. So you've probably given that some thought over the last few months if you have been working from home, and you probably already have workplace health and safety checklists for working from home and so on. But if not, make sure that that is in place, because now you are implementing your plan and everyone's going home to work. Remind your staff that the material they're working on is company confidential. Depending on your sort of business, it may be even more important if you have medical information for customers or any kind of particularly private information. Just remind your staff that they shouldn't leave it lying around on the table on Saturday night when they have their friends over, and that you don't want it anywhere where the 3-year-old could put jammy fingers on it. I mean, just common sense stuff. But when people are suddenly working from home, if they haven't done that before, it does take some time, as possibly you already know, to get your mind around, oh, hang on, I'm at work, I'm not at home. So it's hard. And so reminding them about the confidentiality of the client information is probably useful. And you need to confirm for your staff what work expectations you've got. Now, they're not going to do the same 8 hours of work in an 8-hour day. That isn't going to happen. But if they know the quality and the quantity of work that you're expecting them to do, and you can talk about that and say, well, I can't do any more than 4 hours at my computer because I do have a 3-year-old to look after, whatever, that's okay. Identify what are the things you want them doing. And then people who do get sick, you just confirm that it's okay, you've got plenty of sick leave, or we're going to make some special arrangements if your sick leave has been exhausted, and so on and so on. People will want to know that they will continue to have a relationship with you, the business, when the business is back in business, hopefully in a few weeks. And then the third small chunk of stuff is you've sorted out the staff, they're operating remotely, they have clear expectations about what you want, who's in charge of what, and so on. Then or at the same time, or whatever the sequence is, send your pre-prepared messages out to your customers, suppliers, and others, so that they know that you are under control and still working, albeit in a remoter kind of environment than you were. So you want to make sure you have some processes to maintain contact and confidence with your customers. So if you're going to put a weekly or a daily Facebook update, then do it weekly or daily or whatever it is you say you're going to do, so that people can check on the most current information. Probably daily contact is useful. And even if nothing has changed, I gave you an update on Monday, well, it's Tuesday and nothing's changed. Perhaps just change the date on the update so that everyone knows that whatever you're sitting on the Facebook page or your website or wherever it is, that it's the most recent information, even if nothing has changed from the previous lot of information. So there you go, simple as, really. If you do those 3 chunks of stuff, you'll be in good position. And then when it's over, when you're back to business as usual, hopefully none of your staff got sick. Perhaps some of them did. Let's hope they weren't very sick. They've recovered. They're back at work. Your premises is reopened. You are back doing what you were doing before the unpleasantness began. You should thank people, particularly the customers and the suppliers who hopefully have supported you through this, and clearly your staff who have had to operate in a very strange way for a few weeks at least. Work out how to manage the catching up with your backlogs, because things will not have been done because you were operating remotely and clearly weren't doing 8 hours of work in an 8-hour day. Think about whatever extra overtime you need worked, or casual staff or whatever. How will we catch up? Importantly, make sure your customers in particular and your suppliers know that you are back to full work capacity. You'll know you're back at work, but they might not have that crystal in their minds. And so it's important that they know they can come back to you and keep buying from you the things that they've been buying from you. You might need to do some extra marketing to restore customer confidence, depending on your sort of business and whether COVID-19 might have had a residual effect. We've had instances during the COVID lockdown where businesses who had nothing much to do with it had collateral damage. There was one of the COVID-19 cases in Queensland, in fact, where the partner of the person who was infected worked at a local cake shop. And so the local cake shop was closed down. I'm not sure by health, but just by kind of popular demand, because one of their key staff was known to be related to local COVID outbreak victim. And in small towns, as you know, that information spins around pretty quick. So you might want to get back on the front foot and put up big signs about how it's all cool, we've all recovered, everyone's well, please come and buy something from us again, whatever. And the final step there is you've kept the critical functions operating during the time when people have been away or unwell, but there will be other functions that are now more important than they were, things that didn't need to be done for a month, but you haven't been here for a month. So check that those other functions, if perhaps they're now more time critical than they were before, that they all get attention. So there you go. So listen, if you've done all of that, you've planned for it, you've had to use it, or even if you haven't had to use it, you should now be in a good position to be ready for the next crisis, business interruption. Now, as we know, where we live, this can happen at any time. We might have a flood or a cyclone tomorrow. So before that happens, you've had an incident, you've had an outage, you are now back. You should hold a debrief and document what you learnt from this COVID-19 disruption. In fact, I would encourage you as a business, even if you haven't been closed down and your people haven't been sick, as you start now to come back into the operating in the new COVID safe way, it's probably worth getting the team together, perhaps over Friday afternoon drinks or something, and say, well, what have we learnt? We've been operating in a different way. What are the things that have worked well? What haven't? And it's really very valuable to talk to your staff at least, and perhaps your customers and your suppliers, and say, well, what did work? What didn't work? And get people to share what was a close run thing. It might be that you were shut down and the payroll lady did manage to run the payroll because she ran the payroll on Tuesday, but then on Wednesday she got very unwell. If she got very unwell on Monday, then we wouldn't have been able to run the payroll. What should we think about doing so that doesn't happen next time? So for each of those things, decide for yourself, well, what could we do differently now? Change our approach, change our plans, so that if we have another interruption, COVID-19, cyclone, whatever, what could we do next time? And then obviously, having made those decisions, it is important to write them down, update your business continuity plan. If you've got a full business continuity plan using the template we can provide or any other kind of template, or even if it's just a list of things that you've written down following watching this webinar, update the list so that you've got an up-to-date list of things so that you know what you'll do next time to make sure you can recover your critical functions. And at this time, and following an interruption, and or indeed if you don't have interruptions, probably every year at least, you ought to review your risks. Well, what are the risks in our business? And in the template we can provide, there's a bit of a table for you to look at, well, what are the sorts of risks that we run? What's the chance of our IT failing? What's the chance of key staff becoming unwell or leaving? What's the chance of our plant breaking down? Do we have enough locks and alarms? Run through these headings and just make specific lists for yourself of, well, what is the risk of there being a power interruption? What's the risk of a telecom interruption? You probably experience it from time to time. Well, that's okay because it only happens occasionally, it's only for half an hour. But what would happen if it was for a whole day or a week? What would we do? And then for each of these, it's important to think about, well, what could we do now to prevent that risk being as big as it is? So for each of these headings, and so there's a table in the documentation, write down what is the risk. What's the description of the risk? The risk is security. Well, what's the likelihood of security failing? Not very high. We've got good locks. Okay, what would be the impact? Well, the impact would be significant because if people broke in and stole all our stuff, we would be in trouble because all of our stuff is here. Well, what's our priority for thinking about that? Well, if that's a number one priority, well, what preventative action could we have? Well, we have pretty good locks, but we don't have an alarm. We don't have any on-site video monitoring. We have got all of our stuff in one spot, but we do have a second building where we could store some of our stuff. Should we spread our risk? Think through what you would do to prevent the action, and then your contingency plan. Well, if someone broke in and did steal all of our stuff, what's our contingency plan? well, we buy new stuff, but we've got that well documented, and I've got photos of all of the stuff that we've got, and I've got some insurance, so I'd go and buy some more stuff. Okay, well, that's fine. But just for each of those, think through utilities failure, supply interruption. If one of my suppliers fell over, what's my preventative action? Well, I'll get 2 suppliers who supply me with half of the stuff that I need. And if one of those suppliers falls over, I know that the other one can ramp up and give me twice as much. But it's stunning when you sit down, if you review your risks like this in a structured fashion, a whole range of blindingly obvious things will jump out at you saying, you know, we could do that and that'd be easy. Let's do that now. So then, business continuity planning is no more complicated than what we've been through. Now, your next crisis, I'm starting with the current crisis is COVID-19 comes to your place, but even if COVID-19 doesn't come to your place, the next crisis is probably not going to be lack of staff. It's more likely to be your facility can't be used because there was a cyclone or a flood or a fire, or someone just broke in and trashed the place. Or you might have a loss of IT, and there's dozens of things that can do that. Any hard disk that hasn't failed yet is just a hard disk that hasn't failed yet. Hard disks will die, servers will crash. Make sure you've got backups and so on. But equally, you might be hacked. You may have a ransomware attack, some virus might maliciously get in and do something to your data and so on. But if you've thought through all of this and you know which applications are critical to which business function, then if we lose one or one's been hacked, you have the information you need so you can make sensible decisions in managing your interruption. You may well have loss of key suppliers, and at the moment there are all sorts of supply issues coming into the far north Queensland. You're probably more aware of that than I am, so start to think about multiple suppliers and so on. But if you have an understanding of your critical functions, it will save your business if you have a COVID-19 shutdown. If you understand how you will communicate with your constituents, your staff, your suppliers, your customers, then you will probably have saved your business if you have an incident now. And the business continuity planning you've done this time will also put you in a very good condition to save you the next time as well. So listen, that's it, business continuity. That's the things you should think about. I encourage you to make some notes now. I encourage you to get our template and to fill it in for yourself. You don't have to do it all in a day. I encourage you to do a little bit of it, maybe, you know, set aside an hour a week whenever the quietest part of your week is. Fill in a bit of the plan, come back to it next week. When it's finished, review it, share it with your staff, get a second set of eyes on it. You'll be amazed how useful the process is. So when we do the live webinar, we say, are there any questions? Now, Sarah, who introduced our session, I think she does have a couple of questions that we'll have a go at now. So Sarah, are you there?
Thank you, Graham. Yeah, a couple of questions that came up from the live webinar was around whether a business should ask their suppliers for a copy of their business continuity plan.
Oh, I think that's a very good idea. Yes.
And if you
practice.
Sorry, I was going to say, if you do ask for a copy of the business continuity plan, how can a business be assured that the supplier's business continuity plan is effective?
An equally good question. Yeah, you should say to your suppliers, listen, I really rely on you to give me the things that I buy from you. I need some comfort that if something goes wrong at your place, I'll still be able to get those supply. In a lot of government procurement contracts, you can't supply to government unless you have a solid business continuity plan for all of those reasons, because responsible people who are delivering responsible product to broad audiences need comfort to make sure that if my supplier falls over, it doesn't drop me in a big hole. So good, sensible business practice. So you should have that conversation. Now your suppliers might say, oh no, I don't have one of those. You say, well, I'd encourage you to do it. And gee, there's a template available on the council's website. There was this webinar. Let me walk you through it. And then they need a plan. Now, again, it doesn't have to be a 95-page document, but you will be encouraged if your supplier has thought through these things as you have. And I would encourage you to say, well, yeah, you say you've got a plan and that's great. Could you show it to me? And there's not normally any real reason why a supplier wouldn't show you their plan. Or possibly and more usefully say, when was the last time you had a go at testing that your plan worked? Have you run any kind of exercise? Or have you had an incident at your place of business where you've had to invoke your plan? Walk me through that. In the big end of town, I do a lot of work in banks and insurance companies, and by law, they are well regulated, which leaves me feeling very comfortable as a customer of banks and insurance companies. But by law, banks and insurance companies must have business continuity plans, and they must ask their suppliers for a copy of their plan. And for their critical suppliers, their critical outsourced suppliers, the bank must ensure that that supplier not only has a plan, but that that plan works. And they must ask their suppliers to give them the results of the last exercise or the last incident where they had used their plan to prove that the plan works. The banks by law are required to make sure that their suppliers are as robustly planned as the bank themselves for anything which are critical outsourced suppliers. Now, you are unlikely to do that, but still I would have the conversation with your supplier and say, mate, you delivered me 4 boxes of stuff on a Wednesday. If you've fallen over, you've had an accident in your ute, am I still going to get my 4 boxes of stuff? What's your plan? And when they say, oh, well, I could do this and I could do that, say, no, don't tell me what you could do. I want to know what your plan is. What will you do? What have you worked out you can do? And can you show me where you wrote that down? I mean, you don't need to make a meal out of this, but I mean, it's an important conversation to have for your livelihood, because if they fall over and they can't supply, you are in big trouble and you don't want that to happen. So yes, ask them to show you the plan. Even if it's just 3 things written on a piece of paper, at least you'll know the level of their plan. But if they've got a good plan, that's good. And then say, good, your plan reads well, but the reality is in business continuity planning, as in many things, a plan is no good until you have used it. So if you haven't had to use it for an incident, you should do an exercise. Tablelands Regional Council does exercises of its own business continuity plan, and they know that it works because they have run through using it. So I would encourage you to ask for the plan and then ask them, when did you last use it, test it, exercise it, whatever, and what happened? Sorry, that was a long answer. Cedar?
That was great. Thank you, Graham. Lots of great tips for businesses in our region to prepare not just for the pandemic, but also for lots of other business disruptions. We hope that if you've been watching this webinar online, that you've found some value from the session. Hopefully you've made some notes throughout the webinar, and we encourage you now to formalise those notes. We do have a template business continuity plan on our website that you can tailor to your own business, so we do encourage you to do that. Big thank you to the Queensland Government Get Ready program for the funding, and also to our facilitator, Graham. Thank you.
And Sarah, if anyone wants to follow up, then your contact at the Tablelands Regional Council is Callum Kippen.
Excellent.
You'll find him, his email is on screen there, and or you'll get him on 40892304.
Thanks, Graham.
Thank you very much, Sarah. It's been fabulous. I hope everyone in the area can put their plans together, and I'm also hoping that they don't have to use them in anger for COVID-19, but that they do have the plans for whatever interruption comes to their business over coming years. Thanks a lot.